Mansi, I met her last year in Milan at the Interaction 20 conference. She was actually my roommate at a hostel, and it was like a lucky meeting of us two. And I didn't know back then that she was actually gonna win an award, the IXDA award last year, and I was so proud of her. And I wanted everyone to hear her story, what they did in India, and how they helped thousands of patients literally get good healthcare. And also, you're gonna have a small intro about inclusive design and what that is. I'm actually hoping that some next time we're gonna have a workshop from Mansi because she also has that. And yeah, maybe you can start.
Sure. Thanks so much, Alexandra. So thanks for inviting me to present this project, first of all. Uh, I can maybe start sharing my screen. Should
Yep, sure. Do you have that possibility or?
I? Yeah,
Yeah, we see it. Great.
okay. I'm just trying to make it full screen. Uh, is everyone able to see my full screen, or is it still that view?
Yeah, currently I see
Full
it
screen.
in full screen. Yeah,
Okay,
great.
great. Okay, so I wanted to share the project I did, which started around 2 years ago. So it was mainly leaning towards inclusive design, and how we looked at inclusive design in a very niche area within healthcare. So I'll go into the details of the project a bit later. First, maybe we can discuss a little just about inclusive design. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute and just talk maybe. Or you could, if you're comfortable typing it on the chat, that's also okay. I cannot see the chat, but okay, I can see it. Okay. So, okay. So first talking about Alexandra, should I start?
Yes, you can
Okay.
start.
Cool. Okay. About me, so I've been working with IBM since the past almost 2 years now as an experienced designer and researcher. And I love post-its. That's one thing about me. And I've studied information design for my undergraduation. I haven't done post-graduation yet, but I haven't gone to graduate school. But for my undergrad, I studied information design, game design, and a lot of like electives in textile design as well. So yeah, and I did an internship with GE Healthcare somewhere around my third year, which kind of took me or opened the path of healthcare design for me. So that's how I got into inclusive design. That's how I looked at combining inclusive design and healthcare design. So now a little bit about inclusivity and accessibility and how the two are different. So when we talk about accessibility, you all may have heard web accessibility standards, W3 guidelines, etc. So accessibility is when a certain health condition and the combination of a certain environment and a health condition uh, doesn't allow you to do something. So if I have certain type of color blindness and I'm looking at the screen right now and I cannot distinguish the gray and the black, that's because of the digital environment and my health condition. So that leads to an accessibility issue, or where accessibility needs to be addressed. Whereas inclusivity is nothing to do with any kind of health condition. Inclusivity is purely whether or not, maybe something as simple as whether or not we are privileged to a certain extent. So I am from India. Right now, I'm in Mumbai, which is towards the west coast of India. Sorry. So when we talk about inclusivity in India, we have around 30 to 40 different languages that we speak. So it's really tough for people who don't know how to speak English to communicate when they are not in their hometown. So now when we combine this inclusivity aspect to healthcare design, there are a lot of times when you may not be as privileged to or you may not be as privileged to understand certain languages that are spoken at certain hospitals, or you may not be educated enough to understand certain medical conditions and complications that may occur. So we wanted to, through the project, the whole team wanted to address how we looked at inclusivity within healthcare design, to be more specific, healthcare communication in India. So that's a bit about like accessibility versus inclusivity. Because we're going to talk about inclusivity just in like 5 minutes, I would like to take everyone through like 2 activities which I really look up to, or would like all teams that I work in to be include in the design process. One, to make the product, service, platform that we're designing as inclusive as possible. So the first activity is body storming. So these are some pictures from a body storming session I attended at a design studio which was in the same city as I am in. So it's one of the best methods to understand users who are differently abled or who may not have the same privileges as you and I have, or yeah. So when we look at body storming as an example, now this was related to understanding a healthcare situation. So the product they were designing was for a hospital that is located in a very remote area in India. So usually when you go to such hospitals, there are huge lines. So we were made to stand in a line like that. So I had 10 people before me. I had to stand in the line to like get my turn. So I knew that, okay, someone who's using this service is going to have to spend 15 minutes in that line. And that's the amount of frustration that the person already has, that, okay, I've had to wait. I'm already ill. That's why I'm coming to the hospital, and I've had to wait for 10 to 15 minutes in this queue just to get a number. I have to, so when you're doing body storming, you have to form the whole setup and get it as close as possible to the actual setup. So a lot of times body storming can be useful for everyone in the team who is not able to go to the site where the product or service will be used. So it cannot replace primary research, but in the times that we are in currently, where travel is not always possible, body storming will really help us, because we can understand or create an environment where the product or service will be used. And not just the UX researcher, but even the graphic designer, even the front end developers, everyone gets an idea of or can develop empathy about the people who will be using the product or service. So everything, right from checking your blood pressure to getting the doctor's prescription, everything is done when you do body storming. So yeah, you get first-hand experience about the surroundings in which the device or service is going to be used. And this could give us a very good insight into the kind of problems that the users we are designing for would face. The second method for considering inclusive design to the fullest is situational disabilities, designing for situational disabilities. So inclusive design is, a lot of times you will not realize that you need to include a certain demographic unless you step in the shoes of those people. So if I don't know a certain language, I mean, I won't know how it is to not know English and go to a hospital, because I know English. So I really need to take that effort and not have that bias while I'm designing. So when we are designing for situational disabilities, this is an example. So Microsoft's inclusive design toolkit has been really helpful for me personally. So just an example, when we say you are designing for someone who has a permanent disability, it can be, okay, I have only one arm. Temporary would be an arm injury, whereas situational would be a mother carrying her child in one hand, infant in one hand, and going to the grocery store for shopping. She has only one arm to use. She cannot keep her child on anywhere. It has to be in her arm. So if you design for someone who, so as simple, like a lot of times when we design apps, there are a lot of times when both the hands are needed. So if you design an app in a way that it can be operated with just one hand, you're designing for someone who has a permanent disability, temporary as well as situational. So when we say, so now, like I said, you cannot understand what someone who has only one arm faces, but you can create a situational disability of a new parent. So you can hold something in your hand and try and use your app or the product that you are designing to understand what issues or what problems or concerns a new parent may have. That way, we also increase the scope or the audience that may use our product or service. Similarly, like seeing could be a distracted driver, hearing could be a bartender. Bartender, there's usually a lot of noise, so you cannot hear. And speaking would be a heavy accent. So this toolkit is really like, it can give you a lot of ideas of how to test the product and how to improve it further to make it as inclusive as possible. So I will stop about the design processes now and deep dive into the project. So the name of the project is Enhance. So it was done for a hospital named NIMHANS, which is the National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. So we kind of combined enhancing, the word enhance, and the hospital's name NIMHANS. And it's basically looking at reimagining doctor-patient communication at this hospital. Now, within this hospital, we worked specifically with the neuroimaging and interventional radiology department. So it's a very, very niche area. And as we go further, I'll explain more about why we chose this particular department. So this was a project initiated by our college, which is Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology. And it was a group project between all 8 of us. So these are all my batchmates, and we got together because this was a problem that only I, as a single person, couldn't solve, because we needed animators, we needed script writers, we needed people who were really good with content, people who were really good with sound design, and design researchers, UX researchers, to look at the interface aspect of it. So this was a group project, this is the team. And just a little bit of background. So this is how the hospital looks. There are around 400 people visiting the hospital every day, and the doctors are have to cater to everyone. So they don't have a lot of time. All these patients have different literacy levels. Some of them are not educated, some are educated. So yeah, so deep diving more into the context, because I was talking to Alexa and she told me that the context is something that will be interesting. It may or may not be there in Serbia. So yeah, so this is a little bit about the context. So in this hospital that we worked with, it has a very low doctor-patient ratio. So there are over 400 patients a day, and the number of doctors has not changed in the past, 10 to 15 years, but the number of patients goes on increasing. So yeah, the number of cases has tripled. So it's really difficult for the doctors to cater to everyone and give them equal amounts of time in that particular day. Then secondly, it's a government run body, which means that the costs in general in the hospital for receiving healthcare are really subsidized. But in this particular department that we worked with, the costs are not subsidized. because they use certain materials in interventional cases. They use certain materials that cannot be that are not available in India. They're imported from outside. So the patients have to pay the cost for this. And because it's a government run body, the costs are still more subsidized than private hospitals, obviously. And that's why diverse socioeconomic people from very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds visit this hospital. And because of this, there's a huge difference in medical understanding as well between the patients and the doctors. So as a result, there's low information retention. So maybe like 90% of the patients that visit this hospital haven't received a formal education. And because doctors, nurses, whoever is their administrative staff, they use a lot of technical jargon. Like, something as simple as blood, arteries could be technical jargon to someone who doesn't know the language or is unaware. They just speak in local terms or local words. So this is all technical jargon for them. Because of technical jargon and the lack of education, the information retention is low, and due to that, the doctors have to repeat information a lot of times. So now, as I mentioned earlier, India has a large linguistic diversity, and as a result of that, there are a lot of language barriers. So even though I, as a doctor, may know 3-4 languages, at the most, how many languages can a person know? If I'm a pro at learning new languages, I may know 7 to 8, but not more than that. Even 7 to 8 is very difficult to achieve. So for a doctor working in this area, there are patients coming from all over the country, and they may speak languages that I've never heard of before. So how do I communicate with them? I need a translator. So here, like you see, this is the doctor, this person is the translator. Like someone at the hospital will know the language. So you have to spend time getting hold of that person. The person will come. Then this doctor will translate the information to him, and it will be relayed to these patients. So a lot of the information is lost in translation. No matter how hard you try, as a doctor, what the gist of what you want to convey to the patients may or may not be conveyed the way you want it to be. As a result of all of this, there's a lot of repetition of information that happens, and there are various stakeholders involved. So when these patients come to the hospital, it's not like I'm the patient and I have one person with me who is accompanying me. They usually come from really far away cities and rural areas. So it's a family of maybe 6 or 10 people visiting for the treatment of one person. And this is usually because one person may be in charge of the financial decisions. One person may be the parent or the child of that patient. One person, like the third person, may be someone who understands English or Hindi, which is a very commonly spoken language. So usually they'll bring their grandson or granddaughter who is educated with them to make sure that they understand what the doctors say. So because the doctors have to repeat this information multiple times, it's kind of like a misdirection of their expertise. They could use the same time in treating more patients. So because we don't have specific counselors in this hospital. And as a result of all of these reasons or consequences, background data, the patients end up taking uninformed decisions. So all these challenges end up in them not being completely informed. So through Enhance, we're trying to help them to make informed decisions. We're not saying that this is right or that is wrong, or you should do this or you should do that. We're just trying to tell them these are the different aspects related to your treatment, and once you have understood everything properly, you are free to take your own decision. And it should just not be that after the treatment is done, if something doesn't go right or wrong, the patient shouldn't feel like they were fooled or not informed of something. So that was the aim of this project. So this is a small This is a small infographic on what it looked like before Enhance. There was language barrier, there was illiteracy, there was a lot of medical jargon, and the decision was here. So it was really tough to arrive at the decision. Whereas after Enhance, we want to clear those barriers and make the decision making process happy and easy. Because anyway, these patients who are coming here have very serious neuro brain or neural conditions. So anyway, you're under like tremendous stress and you don't want to spend time stressing about what decision to make. It should come easy. So that was a thought we had. So yes. So now starting, are there any questions that I should be answering?
No, we didn't have any questions. No.
Okay, cool. So yeah. So now starting with the inclusive design and how we conducted the research for this project, we had to use a lot of different tools, create new tools, reiterate tools that were already present in order to suit our target demographic. And we didn't want to have any bias because firstly, we were from an art and design school. So the visual understanding of these patients who come to the hospital is going to be very different from the way we perceive visuals or illustrations or any kind of visual language. So we had to consider all of that. And as a result of that, we had different research methodologies and tools. So the first one was card sorting, there was image show and tell, then there were different workshops that we conducted. There, all of these were conducted in various languages. So for example, card sorting was an activity that we did to understand the priorities of the patients. So as an outsider, I may not know what part of the process throughout the hospital visit or throughout the patient journey map, what part of the process is most important to me. After the research, we came to know that interaction with the doctors was the most important aspect, and getting that trust, building that trust with the doctor, that okay, I can trust my family member to this doctor and he or she will take care of them properly. So that was something that was extremely important for these patients. And many times, like I would think that okay, if I've read something online or if I've spoken over the phone, maybe for me it would still be okay, but for these patients it was not okay. So that was one aspect. Second activity that we tried was image show and tell, where we wanted to see now, because a lot of our output was going to be visual heavy, we wanted to see what visual language these people resonate the most with. So is it illustrations, is it minimal illustrations, is it photographs, or is it really just like line drawing? What kind of visuals is it that they resonate the most with? And we wanted to try and use that visual language in whatever we created. Now another aspect was that the people who visit these hospitals, they're not always like, when we were conducting research, first 5-6 days we conducted research with like one person. So we would visit a shop and ask the shopkeeper to like do these activities, or we would visit hospitals and ask like one patient to do it. But we realized that they were not comfortable, and often they would feel like they were being graded or judged based on what decisions they were making. So we decided to conduct workshops. So if you have like a group of shopkeepers visiting the college for say like half an hour to 1 hour, they knew each other because they were from the same area and they're comfortable with each other. So we would try and play something like Pictionary with them, or to again, now Pictionary also we would so I'm assuming everyone knows what Pictionary is. So we would ask them to draw what a headache would look like for them. So they draw what a headache would look like, and that kind of helped us understand how they interpret visuals or how their imagination works. And at the same time, it served as an icebreaker between our team and the people who were part of the workshop. So the workshop setting really helped us. And another aspect of a of like a pro of having a huge team of 8 people was that each of us spoke a different language, or at least we knew like 5 different languages. So we could cover more people. We could conduct primary research with more people and different kinds of people, because we had that aspect of knowing different languages. So that really helped. And as a result of workshops and knowing different languages, when you know someone's native language, the way you connect with them would be slightly more personal than just having to speak in English with them. So this was another personal observation I had. So when I would know the native language of a certain person who was part of the workshop, maybe before, during the break, or after the workshop, I would share some personal experiences. Or a lot of times we realize that patients or these participants in the primary research, they would share their personal experiences with healthcare. So if someone was hospitalized from their family previously, they would tell us about them, how it was to at that point to go to a hospital and experience the whole filling forms, claiming insurance, meeting the doctor, how the treatment ended up to be. Did they not know certain aspects before they stepped in? So having that command over different languages helped in getting a lot of stories also, which eventually helped us in designing the system. So yes, yeah, we spoke to a lot of experts to begin with. The first maybe 1 or 2 months, we visited the lab in the hospital every day on a daily basis. We were looking at patients. We were present while they were being counseled by the doctors. So this really helped in the research. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to, understand the seriousness of uh, how and in what context our design is going to be used in. So when you sit on these sessions and you're being told that uh, 90% there is a chance that this may not succeed, and you see the look on and feel on the family members' faces, you really, that's when it hits you that okay, if I design something for these people, it's going to really help them. Like it's really going to have an impact on the way they experience healthcare. So the second was, like I said, I think I covered this earlier, understanding the audience. So we conducted research activities with the patient demographic, and yeah, to understand their medical level of understanding. And yeah, and the third was learning from the users. So we did a lot of usability testing with the users also once the prototypes or animatics were ready. And we tried our best to incorporate everything we could from the insights that we had to make the product better. So as a part of the research phase, these were the different kinds of tools we used. I've covered a few of them. Some were video, like some that I didn't cover earlier were one was video show and tell. So this was like an improvisation of Pictionary. So we used Pictionary a lot, but what happened was not all people were very comfortable with drawing. So a lot of them would feel really intimidated when we asked them to draw something. So that's when video show and tell helped. So one of our teammates, Ranjini, she enacted a headache. She enacted an upset stomach, or she enacted having fever. And we show them these videos and ask these patients to guess what they meant, like what condition were we trying to convey through this action. And we, if they did guess it correctly, we'd use the similar action or like the similar kind of video in the animation later on. So that would inform like how they interpret video or like moving objects. So that was one aspect. Another was stakeholder map, to see like we wanted to eliminate translators, and we wanted to give the whole power to the people, like the family members, to like in order to make the decision. So some stakeholders we didn't want to give too much importance to. Then there was the patient journey map. So when we mapped this patient journey map, there were a lot of areas that needed work. So administration used to take like hours and hours. Maybe you go today, you don't get an appointment, you have to come 3 days later. But these were things that through design at our level, we couldn't solve. So the patient journey map really helped us in prioritization and understanding what is it that we were targeting, and um, diving into that niche area. So that niche area was information design, and to provide them with the correct information in order to make the decision. So these were the different tools we used in the research phase. This is just a snippet of how card sorting looked like. Um, we would ask them to, place these cards in different piles, something that's most important, medium importance, least, and something that's not a problem at all. So yeah, this was card sorting. And now going into what is it that we designed? So how did we try to solve the problem? So Enhance is trying to make medical information more accessible for a multilingual and illiterate audience. So the first thing that we wanted to do was we wanted to answer the frequently asked questions, which the doctors had to spend multiple, like they had to explain the same questions again and again, which kind of ended up in them repeating the same information many times, and which they could have, and the same time could have been used alternatively. So we wanted to answer the frequently asked questions, and we did that through animated explainer videos. So these videos would answer basic questions that would provide the patients with the fundamental knowledge of understanding that the particular condition that their family member was experiencing. So it would cover different aspects, like, the common sections would be the anatomy of the brain, something as simple as that. A lot of people don't know what the anatomy is. A lot of people don't know the anatomy of the spine, and the spine and the brain are really closely connected. So we had small sections of animations explaining this, along with audio in 8 different languages that were the most commonly spoken ones in that state, in the city that the hospital was in. Then taking the example of a very specific condition called an aneurysm, we would explain, so after the anatomy of the brain, we'd explain what is an aneurysm in the first place. So, and after explaining to them what an aneurysm is, we would then tell them how an aneurysm is treated, and how the, like, we, which is NIMHANS, is going to treat this aneurysm, so that they know and they can visualize how the treatment is. And once they can do that, maybe it just clarifies certain doubts that they have in their heads. So because it's interventional radiology and interventional treatment, there is no blood loss, and no one's cutting open anything. It's not surgery. It's all done through like intravascular means. So that was something that, you cannot show. So it was really important for us to show this visually, to show them how it's going to be treated. There will be something that's inserted in your veins or arteries, and that, like, some substance will be released, and that's how we will treat it. So all this had to be shown visually, otherwise it's nearly impossible for someone like me to understand. Like, before I went to this hospital and worked and like spent around maybe 1 month understanding the different kinds of treatments, it would be difficult even for someone like me who has gone through the whole school and like graduation and everything. It would be difficult for me also to understand this. So yeah, that was one. Second was, we were trying to contextualize the information. So a lot of times, if you have realized, like at least in India, when we go to doctor clinics, when the doctors are explaining what has happened to us and what kind of treatment we need, they will usually, draw on like a rough sheet of paper where they write medicine names. This makes sense to the doctor, but it may or may not make sense to me. But a lot, so through the observations that we were doing, we understood that a lot of times people would want to take this paper back home. But once you are out of that doctor's office, this information may not make sense to the other family members. And as a result, I bring them back like, oh, can you explain the same thing to him or her? So we wanted to try and eliminate that and provide more like translatable information to these patients. So we created a pamphlet which had like basic diagrams. So this was the different parts of the brain. This is the top in front view of the brain. This is the back view of the brain. This is the whole body. So here like the treatment is done through the thigh. It is taken through all these intravascular veins here, and then it reaches the brain, and that's when the treatment actually starts. So just to like roughly explain to the patients, here they can actually show the location of the aneurysm or whatever treatment has to be done, like the exact position roughly again. So this can also then be taken outside the consultation, and this pamphlet can be shown to different family members so that they understand the condition. And maybe like, you know, all 10 questions won't go. Maybe instead of 10 new questions, they have 5 new questions. So it will result in saving some amount of time. So we don't want to eliminate talking to the doctor again, but it will just reduce the amount of time they'll spend. And the third is explaining technical jargon. So the consent forms that we sign at hospitals saying I don't have any problem and, you know, the doctors can proceed with the treatment, these were present only in English. And maybe like 0.1% people understand English in this hospital, patients. So if they don't understand English, how are they going to, how are they supposed to, how are they supposed to sign this form? So a lot of times, because of time constraints, the patients would be told that there's 99%, there is no risk, there is only 1% risk, so you can just sign this. And a lot of them used to sign it. But now, for the patients who fell into that 1% risk, now if a person has gone to the hospital and their family member falls into that 1% risk, they were told there's 1% risk, but for that particular member it was 100% risk, right? So that was something that really struck us, and we wanted to try and address that through our solutions. So what we tried to do was we made audio-visual consent forms. So firstly, we translated the content into local languages, all the 8 languages that we decided to work with in the beginning. We translated that consent form into all these languages with the help of translators. After that, we localized, we tried to explain the same information in really local terms that were used. So, like as an example, if I have to say that there is a clot in your artery, there is a blood clot in your artery. So an easier way to say that would be, so imagine there is a blood tube in your brain and there is traffic. So there is traffic jam in that blood tube. Now the cars have to go from somewhere. You know, they are going to find alternative lanes, smaller roads to pass that traffic jam. So as a result of that, the vein has a bulge from one side. So because the blood can't pass through straight, it has to take a curve and pass. Now this is harmful to the patient's health. So as an example, like this is how we try to localize or simplify the information that was present in this form. And as and when the audio, so also this was also recorded. whatever was being shown in the form was also had a recording in that local language. So if this was being spoken and I was hearing this part of the consent form, that would be highlighted or it would be made bold so that I knew that, okay, what I'm hearing is this part, what I'm hearing now is this next part. So, and as a result of this, we did a lot of testing after the interventions after the tools were made. We did a lot of testing, and we had a total like 26 cases were observed in the hospital. Now, this was not user testing. This was actual, like in that hospital, we were testing this. We observed 26 cases, and in those 26 cases we got 26 questions, 20 reactions, and the quality of questions was really good. So our, like I said earlier, our aim was not to make the patients not speak up and not have questions, but improve the quality of questions. So I'll get to that later. The first part is so this table shows just give me a minute. Okay, yeah, so this table shows the different parts of the video that are there. So the first part was introduction. Then so if I'm just some context, so if I'm looking at the condition of that aneurysm that I spoke about, that video, the whole animated explainer video would have these sections. It would have introduction, basic anatomy, about the condition, so information about that particular condition, the diagnosis, how it will be diagnosed, then how the doctors or the hospital is going to treat that particular condition, the risks and complications that may occur while it is being treated, the cost associated, and how the patients and the family members are supposed to go ahead or go forward with the treatment. So the most number of questions were when we reached the risks and complications, because everyone wanted to know what kind of risks would be associated to this particular condition or this particular treatment. Going forward also gotten a lot of questions. Cost was okay, like most of the times they were willing to pay whatever was required because they wanted to get the treatment anyhow. Diagnosis was also very like, okay, this is how it's going to be diagnosed. Are there any alternative ways of diagnosing it? A lot of times a CT scan would be done, but we'd ask them to do an angiogram. So why do we have to do it again? Questions like those. So we tried like in the future, we may try to address that as well. These questions as well in the videos to save further time. So when we talk about questions as an example, so before Enhance was, so when we did observation without using the tools we designed, we would have questions like how much does the treatment cost? Then till when can we pay the amount? When can we meet the doctors again? So these were the kind of questions that were asked. And after the treatment, like after the patients were shown, this audiovisual consent form, after they were shown the animated explainer video, we would have questions like, will intervention be a better method to treat this, since it involves hardly any blood loss? So a lot of times someone who has a heart condition or someone who has high blood pressure is not recommended to go through surgery. So they would have questions like these. Then second would be like, as an example would be, because general anesthesia is not available right now, the treatment is going to be slightly delayed. So is that going to affect the patient's overall condition? Then what will happen if so sometimes instead of one aneurysm, a patient would have more than one aneurysm. So many times the doctor would say that, okay, we need to treat only one, we don't have to treat both of them. So the question would be like, what if the second aneurysm is not treated? What will happen? Another question, very common question would be that a lot of the times these patients would have a health insurance which would be willing to pay money, but because the rules of the hospital say that they need to pay half the amount before the treatment. They want to know whether the insurance is going to give them the amount right away, or will they have to give the amount right now or not. So there was a lot of difference between these two, kinds of questions. So we could see the impact that that providing information was having on them. So yeah, that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation. This was the impact that it had. So our objective, like I mentioned earlier, was to provide them with as much information as possible so that they ask better questions, they get more informed, and that was happening. We still need to do a lot of testing, and I'm sure there are more ways to improve this, but this was just like the first attempt that we tried to do. So we were the first designers that worked with this department, and they had never worked with designers before. So it was like the first attempt. So we are still trying to see how to move ahead with it. It's currently being used at the hospital, and every day there are close to maybe 200 patients visiting the hospital during COVID times. So yeah, we have to see how it goes and how the feedback is over time. So yeah, these are a few, okay, this is not really related, but these are a few accessibility related articles that I keep writing. I still haven't written anything on inclusivity specifically, but I will try to address that as well. So now if there are any questions, I think we can do that.
Yeah, we have a question from Asmita. Oh, first of all, thank you for this presentation. It was amazing. And I loved the illustrations and animations. It was amazing.
Thank you.
And the first question from Asmita is, did the doctors view and check the correctness of the content you presented to the patients?
Yes, this was maybe this part of the process took the most amount of time because it was going to be used by the hospital in their space. We had to be extremely correct with whatever information we were presenting in the animated videos. So it would go multiple levels of iterations. So even simple things like if we use, like in the illustrations, if you see, uh, the vein is supposed to, the thickness of the vein is different from that of the artery. So the doctor would even review that. Then like this thickness has to be 1 point, this thickness has to be 3 points, this cannot be. So it was a lot of accuracy that we had to follow, and a lot of times even the language, even the script that we had to go a lot of levels of iterations. So it was thoroughly checked by these by the medical professionals present in the hospital. And yeah.
And well, I have a question. I was thinking, since this is such a success, do you think that other hospitals might take this example and apply it to themselves as well?
Yeah, definitely. So that was the aim actually. So if you see, just like, yeah, so if you see over here, if I'm going to say I'm treating an aneurysm, the introduction, basic anatomy, diagnosis, maybe risks and complications, cost, and going forward stay the same for each illness that the particular department treats. So if it's a neuroimaging and interventional radiology department in any part of India, these like 60% to 70% of the content is going to be the same. Only content that is specific to that particular hospital or that particular maybe like your treatment may be different with different conditions. About the condition may be a little different. So we have created the entire structure in such a way that parts of it can be reused, and you only have to change certain parts so that different hospitals can use it. Now, of course, this what we created right now is belongs to NIMHANS, and we have to look at how we can expand it and provide it to other hospitals. Right now, it's only being used by NIMHANS, but in the future, definitely the aim would be to take it to as many hospitals as possible and provide them with this information.
Okay, we have another question from Gerardo. I hope that I spelled the name correctly. How would you bring the project in a remote context? Like Corona has created more virtual consultation with doctors because hospitals try to avoid contact if it's not needed. So if people could use your app from their homes.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. So since all the content is available on a desktop or even your phone, you can use it online. Right now, because of the confidentiality of the information, we don't allow them to take it on their phones or take it outside the hospital, because it is very specific to this particular hospital and this particular department. So but definitely because of so again, one more aspect that comes into picture is these conditions cannot be treated remotely. So if I have to get a diagnosis, I have to go through an angiogram, which cannot happen remotely. So I have to be present in the hospital. So that is of course one aspect. So I right now cannot imagine how telehealth or something would take place in this particular context. But if it does, then definitely, because everything is digitally available, it can be shown to the patients remotely. One story that I can share is, so we had this one case where we showed, so there was one husband and wife who had got their mother to the hospital. She had an aneurysm or a similar condition. And now they had their their parents or their children or other family members back in their hometown. So they saw these videos, they saw, like, they understood extremely well. They were also discussing that, okay, this complication can occur, that complication can occur. So now they were calling their family members back in the hometown who couldn't come here to the hospital and trying to explain this to them. So they really wanted to see if there was a possibility to send them this video so that they can also see it, because no matter how much they try, they couldn't explain the way the video was explaining to them. But now this was not allowed by the hospital. So but I can definitely see that it will be very beneficial, or I can see how it will be beneficial, because not everyone in the family can be present in the hospital, but they want to know about, like, what's happening. So we should definitely try to make it remotely available as well.
Okay.
If that answers it.
Yeah, thank you. Another question from Nicola is, how long did the whole project take?
Okay, so so in college, like when I was in my undergraduation, we worked on this for 6 months, 6 to 7 months, and in that much time we could only cover 2 conditions and the consent, audiovisual consent form and the pamphlet. So 2 conditions in 8 languages took 6 months. And after that, I did not work on it full time, but four of my team members worked on this full time, and they produced the content in, like, for all the other conditions. So there were 9 conditions in total. So they, for the remaining 7 conditions, they worked on it for close to 1 year. So roughly, if I have to give an estimation of the whole project, it took like maybe 1 year, 5 months to 1 year, 6 months to get implemented, tested, and approved by the hospital for using it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Next question from another Nicola is, what were doctors and hospital staff reaction to end results? How did they accept this?
Okay, this is really interesting. So, we so a lot of times this kind of introduction of new technology or new methods of treatment and consultation can not, like, a lot of times we face backlash because these doctors have and any kind of because it's a change in their process, so they have been doing something for a long time a certain way, and now suddenly these 8 designers have come and they're like saying, okay, you do consultation this way. So we're still looking at that. They definitely responded really positively because it was also helping them. It was also saving a lot of their time, the doctor's time, uh, by not having to repeat the same information again and again. So they were definitely happy with the solution, but we have to see how they're responding to it. They have responded extremely positively till now, but I think, like, we'll be able to comment on that, like, once we see how it performs in the long run. But yeah, it was a very major change in the way they consult patients.
Okay, and I think this will be the last question for you from Mladen.
Okay.
If I understand correctly, the 26 cases observed were after implementing the solution. And if
Yes.
so, what's the volume of end users that participated in the research phase? How did you know what was sufficient?
Okay. So I'll try to answer this. So the 26 patients were observed after implementing the solution, and this was done only for the aneurysm video. So this was only done for one kind of video because different conditions would have different results and observations. So we wanted to see patients that were only coming for one particular kind of treatment, and how, so that's how we were able to, like, get this statistics that, okay, this part is more important, that part may not be that important, like about the condition is also, like, there were reactions, basic anatomy maybe not that much. So this was done after the solution was implemented. Now what's the volume of end users that participated in the research phase? We had 75 participants in the research phase, which spanned across a timeline of like 2 months, maybe 1.5 to 2 months. Uh, and how did we know that was sufficient? So we tried to, now because this is a government hospital, there are people coming from different kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds. So we tried to cover as many as we could. So some people could afford treatment, some people had to take loans for treatment, some people had to maybe sell their land back at home to be able to afford this treatment. So we tried to include all kinds of people in it. So different kinds of economic backgrounds, different kinds of, some were literate, some were not some were illiterate, some had received a formal education, some had not, some had prior healthcare experiences, some had never been to a hospital all their lives. So we tried our best to get different insights. And yes, like till late, like maybe if we interview another 200 primary research participants, we may get slightly varied results, but we thought 75 was like a good number at that point. And we also had to, because it was a thesis project, we couldn't just go on with the research, we had to produce something at the end. So it was also like a timeline issue, so we had to we had 2 months for research, and that's why we could cover 75 people.
Okay, that's it. I guess we don't have any more questions. We can wrap it up now. Thank you so much for coming virtually to Serbia to talk to us about this. I wish you could have come here. I hope that someday it would be a reality.
Yes.
And this was so much fun for me, and I hope it was for all the others. It's really late here and for you as well. And thank you all for coming, because I know it's so hard to just actually attend to some virtual event.
Yeah.
So
Thank you everyone for attending.